Here I'll be looking at the Gerchberg-Saxton algorithm. It's an iterative phase retrieval algorithm whereby we've got two intensity-only images, like the kind of images you'd capture on a camera, and those two images were captured in two different planes separated by a Fourier transform. For example, the intensity of the near field and the corresponding intensity of its diffraction pattern. And the goal of the algorithm is to extract/guess the phase at each point, each pixel in those images in both the near and far fields. The Gerchberg-Saxton algorithm, the GS algorithm, is relatively straightforward. It only has a few steps and it converges to a solution very quickly, despite what is typically a very large solution space. Those images in the near and the far field could consist of many points, many pixels, that could have just about any phase value. So that's a lot of unknowns at the start. GS doesn't necessarily give you the global optimum solution, but particularly for simple scenarios, it'll often give you something that's pretty close. But what kind of sorcery is this? How can you extract phase information, which ostensibly you didn't even measure, from a bunch of standard intensity-only images? Isn't that just madness? Like asking someone to apply some algorithm to work out what's inside this box? We didn't observe inside that box, so there could be anything in there. Whatever we guess would just be completely made up and fantastical. Well, not quite. Indeed, if someone gave you one intensity-only image with no additional information and asked you to extract the phase, that would be a ridiculous request. The important point here is that in the case of the Gerchberg-Saxton algorithm, there's that Fourier transform relationship between those two planes. And remember, each point in the Fourier plane is the interference between every point in the image plane. So every point in the Fourier plane gives us a different interference scenario between all the points in the image plane. And it's that interference which can reveal the phase information. Like you would when you're attempting to extract phase information in other types of measurements by interfering beams or parts of beams together and discerning the phase shift between the beams based on the intensity created when they're interfered together. There are different variations on the traditional GS algorithm, and it was originally used for phase retrieval and X-ray diffraction rather than optics. The very short wavelength of X-rays makes some of the interference techniques you'd use in optics to retrieve phase difficult or impossible to implement. So in X-rays, perhaps all you can get hold of is an intensity image of the near field and the far field. We start with some unknown field. It doesn't really matter whether we're talking about X-rays, microwaves, visible, infrared, but the illustrations I'll be showing will be more along the lines of optics. In this example, our as yet unknown field is a smiley face, where the eyes and the mouth are out of phase with the head outline. So color represents phase in these types of plots, and bright and dark represents the field's strength, i.e. the square root of intensity. But that phase profile is unknown to us at this time, so that's what we want to find out. So we take a look at that field on a camera, and we see the intensity of a smiley face, but of course there's no phase information. There's just the brightness for each pixel that the camera records. Then we take a look at the beam in the Fourier plane. So that is, we look at it in the far field. In this diagram, I've split off a separate copy of the original smiley face beam using a beam splitter, and then I've looked at it in the Fourier plane, the far field, with a camera at the focal plane of a lens. Alternatively, you could just move that first camera further back until you reach the far field. So either way. In the Fourier plane, we see the intensity of the diffraction pattern of the smiley face. Again, there's no direct phase information, there's just intensity recorded at each pixel on the camera. Now you might think, all I've got is these two intensity measurements, no phase information, didn't measure phase, I can't just magically get phase. So I guess that's it, the end. But that's actually not the case. There's more information in there about the phase than you might initially realize. As I mentioned, importantly, every pixel in the Fourier plane is the interference between every point in the image plane. So every pixel on the second camera is the interference between all the pixels on the first camera. There are a lot of interference measurements contained in the Fourier plane from which you might be able to get phase. Because there's a lot of phase values on camera 1 and camera 2 that would not be consistent with the intensities that we saw on camera 1 and camera 2. If we know the intensity in both planes, and we know that each plane is separated by a Fourier transform, then some phase distributions we choose at random, let's say, wouldn't make sense. They wouldn't be consistent with what we measured. They can't just be any phase anywhere, because When you change the phase in one plane, you change the corresponding intensity formed by the interference in the next plane. However, it's still worth noting that there's not necessarily one unique solution. You could have a scenario where two beams have the same image plane and Fourier plane intensity, even though their phase is different. The Laguerre-Gaussian modes are an example of this. So the plus and minus azimuthal Laguerre-Gaussian modes both had the same intensity profiles in the near and the far field. You wouldn't be able to distinguish between them using Gerchberg-Saxton. The two planes also don't have to be related by the Fourier transform. It could be some other unitary transformation. That is a lossless transformation. It has to be lossless because otherwise you'd be losing information. But whatever the transform is, it'll have to have sufficient interference between the positions in both of those two planes. If you want to extract the phase relationship between 2 points, they'll need to be interfering through whatever transform you're using. And Fourier transform is an extreme case in that everything interferes with everything, so you're always covered in that sense. Okay, so we move forward. I'll be talking in terms of field amplitude rather than intensity, but the field amplitude is just the square root of intensity. The plan of attack is we're going to take a starting guess of the phase in the image plane, Fourier transform back and forth between the image plane and the Fourier plane, and at each iterative step, we're going to reinforce the amplitude that we saw on the cameras. So that's the amplitude we know for certain, and that's not negotiable. However, we'll let the phase do whatever it likes to accommodate that known amplitude. The amplitude is fixed, that is what it is, and the phase values are the free variables, which must satisfy the constraint that is the amplitude. So we start off. Well, I know the amplitude, I saw that on the camera. Phase, I don't know. So I'm just going to guess. I'll guess it's flat. But you can guess a lot of things. Ask your doctor what phase distribution is right for you, but I'm going to just go with flat phase, so all zeros. This is our first guess. Now let's take a look at what that would look like in the Fourier plane. So that is the plane of our second camera from before. Okay, we get some distribution of amplitude and phase, but that amplitude isn't what we saw on the camera. This is what we saw on the camera. So we're going to replace the amplitude the algorithm gave us, based on our initial guess, with the amplitude we actually observed because we know that to be true. The phase can do whatever it likes. We're going to keep that as is. That's the parameter we're trying to find. So amplitude is enforced as a constraint, and then phase is a free variable. Then we inverse Fourier transform back to the image plane, and we do the same thing. Replace the amplitude with what we observed and let the phase stay as is. Then we transform back into the Fourier plane. And we keep going through that process iteratively, constantly enforcing amplitude to conform with what we observed on the cameras and letting phase vary in order to accommodate that. With each step, you're nudging it towards a solution which satisfies your constraints. I think of it a little bit like how an oscillator works. You've got an amplifier that's just putting out random noise. You feed it back on itself with a very selective frequency filter on the feedback, and then every round trip, it just keeps sucking more and more of the total output power into that region with all the gain. It plucks a signal up out of the noise just by continually reinforcing it. In this case, it's like you've got a kind of spatial filter in the loop, and with every iteration, you keep selecting the part of the field which aligns with what you want and sending that back through, until it tends to suck up all the power. You keep replacing the amplitude the algorithm gave you with the amplitude you know to be true, and in doing so, you keep nudging it in the direction of a better solution. Okay, so that's the GS algorithm uses a phase retrieval algorithm, where we've got two planes of known intensity and unknown phase. A different use case that's different in practice but simulates exactly the same is when we want to calculate an optical phase mask like a hologram that will give you a desired intensity pattern in the Fourier plane. Experimentally, that's a different use case, but numerically it's the same. You have two known amplitudes in near and far fields respectively, and two corresponding unknown phases. Let's say we've got a Gaussian illumination beam and we want to generate a smiley face intensity in the Fourier plane. That's the same problem as before. We run the algorithm exactly the same. And we eventually get a smiley face intensity in the Fourier plane. We enforce the known Gaussian amplitude illumination in the image plane, and we enforce the smiley face goal amplitude in the Fourier plane. whilst the phases in both planes are free to take on whatever form ends up being consistent with the enforced amplitudes. Alright, that's well and good, but what about a different scenario that also comes up quite a lot? The scenario where we care about both the amplitude and the phase in the Fourier plane. So in this scenario, the phase can't just be anything. We also need to control the phase. It also needs to conform to our requirements. For instance, if we're trying to generate a specific Laguerre-Gaussian mode, the amplitude has to be correct, but also the phase has to be correct. They're both important. We can't let the phase be a free parameter like we did before. That can just take on whatever distribution it likes. It has to be the phase of the specified LG mode. That's our target. Our goal is now a complex field, not just an intensity. So we need to control both amplitude and phase. Well, in this scenario, the same sort of basic principles apply. You enforce one aspect of the field, and you let the other aspect change as you transform back and forth between the planes. But the parts you keep constant and reinforce, and the parts you let change are different. In the image plane, the collimated plane, we keep it the same as before. We'll enforce the Gaussian illuminating beam on the phase mask, so that's non-negotiable. That's just the beam that's coming from our laser source, let's say. The phase mask that Gaussian beam illuminates is a free parameter which can do whatever it likes. The phase of the Gaussian beam is flat, but if it was some other beam type with non-uniform phase, you just have to extract that phase of the illuminating beam from the calculated mask at the end or something to that same effect. It doesn't have to be a Gaussian beam, it could be anything is what I'm saying. Now in the Fourier plane, instead of setting the amplitude as the goal and the phase as a free parameter like we have thus far, instead you can set it up so that the field inside a certain region of the Fourier plane is the goal. So that's the bit we'll be continually reinforcing through each iteration. And the field outside of that region can do whatever it likes. That's the free parameter. Rather than split up the problem into amplitude and phase, it's been split up into area of interest and don't care region. So the region we care about and the region we don't care about. Let's take a look at how that plays out. We'll start here with a phase. That's the phase of the inverse Fourier transform of the goal field. That's the phase mask which maximizes the total power delivered to the goal field, albeit at the expense of potentially exciting some modes we don't want to. So the overall quality of the field might not be that great, but it will deliver the maximum amount of power to our goal field. You can think of it a bit like a sledgehammer type phase mask. So it delivers maximum power to the target spatial mode, but you might also be delivering a bunch of power to nearby spatial modes that you'd actually rather avoid. So high power, but potentially bad crosstalk. But in this instance, we're looking for something a little bit more precise, something that gives us a little bit better beam quality, at least inside the region of interest. Okay, so we've got our starting guess of a phase mask, and we transform that into the Fourier plane. It actually looks pretty good already. It's not a bad starting guess in this particular case. It's a bit off. By eye, you might not be able to tell that it's actually the wrong size, and it's got some side lobe ring artifacts there as well, which we don't want. Now we replace the central region we've got with the goal field we want, and we leave the outside area, that outer region there, untouched. It can just stay as it is. Here you've got a choice about how much you want to weight the total power in the goal region versus the total power in that outside don't care region. If you weight it too much in the favor of the goal, so let's say you'll tolerate nothing less than 100% power delivered perfectly to the goal. So that's 100% goal, 0% background noise. Well, then the algorithm just won't converge. So the price for your greed is you'll just always get the same result you got from the first iteration forever. Won't go anywhere, won't move. If you go the other extreme, so let's say 1% goal power and 99% background noise power, you might get a very nice final goal field that has almost no power in it. And in practice, you'll have thrown away a lot more power than you needed to. You could have thrown away a lot less power and still got a result that's basically just as good. We want to put no more power than we have to into that background region in order to achieve the beam quality that you're after in that region of interest. Get the high beam quality, don't throw away extra power. All right, we transform back into the image plane, enforce the Gaussian illumination, keep the phase, and then just keep doing that until it converges. So how much power do you have to sacrifice to that background noise region? The maximum power you'll be able to deliver to the desired mode will be the amplitude overlap between the illuminating beam and the goal field in the plane of the phase mask. If we've got our illuminating beam F and our goal field coming from the other direction B, and they're both meeting on the phase mask, the maximum coupling between the two is their overlap when you assume the phase is matched perfectly, because you matched it with the phase mask. And hence the only remaining mismatch is due to their different amplitude profiles, which you can't do anything about. That loss is just inherent to the system. And that outside background don't care region will at the very least have that missing power in it. It'll have at least the power that corresponds with the mismatch between the amplitude distribution of the source and the goal in the plane of the phase mask. You fundamentally can't deliver more power than that to the target field. But the power will actually be a little bit worse than that, because you'll have to deviate from that maximum power scenario in order to dodge coupling into other undesired modes. When we move from that sledgehammer type approach to our more pickaxe type approach now, we will lose a little bit of power, but we'll gain precision. The way I typically do it is I'm often trying to excite a single mode in a multi-mode optical fiber without exciting any of the other modes the multi-mode fiber also supports. So I've got one spatial mode of the core I want to hit, and a bunch of nearby spatial modes within that same circular aperture of the fiber core that I want to avoid. I start off with a maximum coupling scenario as a guess, and then slowly keep letting more and more power into the background don't care region until the other modes I care about are suppressed enough for my practical purposes, so often like 20 or 30 dB suppression. As the algorithm's running here, you can see it starts off delivering the maximum power it can to the target mode, then slowly increases the amount of allowable background noise, which slightly pulls down the coupling efficiency of the target mode, but it pulls down the coupling efficiency of the unwanted modes a lot more, until eventually the unwanted modes are at least, let's say, 25 dB down relative to the target mode, and the algorithm terminates. But you don't have to be filtering out regions of the far field into regions of interest and don't care regions based on the core of an optical fiber. The other common scenario is you have a pinhole filter, which only lets the region of interest through and discards the don't care region. Effectively, the pinhole filter, or the fiber core, is doing the amplitude filtering your phase mask in the image plane didn't do. You've split the problem into a phase-only filter in the image plane and an amplitude-only filter in the Fourier plane, rather than having a full complex amplitude and phase filter in one of those planes. On this slide, we can see the efficiency at which each of the first 55 LG modes can be generated, assuming we want to suppress all the other modes by at least 25 dB. So these are the efficiencies of a set of 55 different phase masks, all individually targeting a specific mode. And that efficiency is related to how well the illuminating Gaussian beam's amplitude distribution overlaps with the amplitude of the target mode distribution. We can see if we change the size of the Gaussian illuminating beam, then we start to preference higher or lower order modes. The higher order modes are bigger on the phase mask and hence prefer a bigger Gaussian illumination, whilst the lower order modes are smaller. They've got a smaller effective area, and they want a Gaussian illumination that also has that smaller effective area. When you've got one phase mask like this, you can't just have one Gaussian illumination beam that will equally satisfy all modes optimally. It's a trade-off. Okay, thanks for listening. So that's the basics of the Gerchberg-Saxton algorithm, with a little bit of emphasis on using it to generate optical fiber modes at the end there. However, it's an algorithm which is relevant to many areas of science in which the phase of a signal needs to be recovered from what is ostensibly amplitude-only, intensity-only information.